Imagine someone looking you dead in the eye. Someone who thinks they own the room, who believes they can twist your emotions like a dial, who thrives on keeping you off balance, and in a single moment you turn everything upside down. Imagine saying just one sentence and watching their confidence crack. Not because you yelled, not because you fought, but because, for the first time, they realized you are no longer under their control. You see, most people spend years trying to negotiate with toxic behavior, trying to please someone who cannot be pleased, trying to fix someone who never wanted to change. And the entire time, the person pulling their strings believes they have the upper hand. Because you're emotional, you're reactive, and they know exactly which buttons to push. But what if I told you there is a moment, a shift, where everything changes? A moment where the person who used to make you feel small suddenly doesn't know what to do with you anymore. A moment where they look at you and fear you, not because you're dangerous, but because you finally became untouchable. And the strange thing is, it doesn't happen with power or revenge or confrontation. It happens with clarity. It happens when you say one simple sentence, one they never expect, one they can't fight, one that strips away every ounce of influence they thought they had over you. Stay with me. Because once you learn this sentence, and once you understand why it works, you'll never fall into their trap again. You'll walk into any room, any conversation, any conflict, with a kind of calm confidence that makes manipulators back up and rethink everything. This isn't about overpowering someone else. This is about finally stepping into the version of yourself they hoped you'd never become. The version that sees clearly, stands firmly, and can't be controlled. So let's begin. Because once you hear this, you'll never be the same. To understand how to disarm a narcissist, you first have to understand what drives them. Because their behavior isn't random. It isn't accidental. It's engineered, calculated, and built on a very specific psychological foundation. And once you see that structure clearly, the entire illusion starts to crumble. You stop personalizing their behavior. You stop feeling responsible for their emotions. And you stop falling into the same traps over and over again. A narcissist doesn't wake up in the morning feeling powerful. They wake up feeling threatened. Every single day, their identity hangs by a thread because their entire sense of self depends on what other people think of them. They need admiration like oxygen. Without it, they suffocate. And that's the first truth most people miss. Beneath the surface level arrogance is an incredibly fragile ego, one so delicate that any small criticism feels like an attack on their very existence. This is why they act the way they do. Every brag, every insult, every moment they try to make you feel small. It's all a defensive strategy. They build themselves up by tearing other people down. They need control because control makes them feel safe. They need you emotionally off balance because that uncertainty gives them the upper hand. When they sense you pulling away, they chase. When they sense you getting too confident, they undermine. When they see your strengths, they try to dim them. They cannot tolerate the idea of someone else outshining them, because internally they feel like they're barely holding themselves together. A narcissist tests people long before you realize what's happening. They study you. They watch how you react to small moments, how quickly you apologize, how easily you forgive, how uncomfortable you get with conflict. If you flinch when they give you a backhanded compliment, they mark it. If you rush to explain yourself when they accuse you of something, they store it away. If you shrink to keep the peace, they make a note this person can be controlled. And that's the part that shocks people the most. Narcissists don't go after weak individuals, they go after strong ones, kind, empathetic. Giving people are prime targets. Why? Because their kindness can be exploited. Their empathy can be manipulated. Their desire to see the good in others becomes a vulnerability. A narcissist sees someone who listens, someone who cares, someone who tries, and they latch on, not because they admire it, but because they can use it. Their tactics come in patterns. At first, they will charm you, flatter you, pull you in. They make you feel seen. They make you feel special. They mirror your values, your interests, even your language. They shape themselves into whatever they think you want. But the moment they feel they have you, the mask slips. Suddenly the compliments stop, the warmth fades. The inconsistencies begin. They create confusion. Just enough that you question yourself more than you question them. This confusion is intentional. It's psychological fog. When you're constantly trying to decode their reactions, you forget to pay attention to their behavior. Every time they shift blame, deny what happened, or rewrite history. They're reinforcing the idea that they hold the truth and you don't. The more uncertain you become, the more control they gain. But possibly their most powerful weapon is emotional provocation. They know your triggers, whether it's being misunderstood, feeling unappreciated, or wanting harmony. They poke at those emotional wounds not by accident, but with precision. When they ignite your emotions, you react. And when you react, they dominate the moment. They feel powerful while you feel destabilized. This is why a narcissist does not fear your anger. They expect it. They feed on it. They know how to use it. What they fear is your calm, your clarity, your refusal to be manipulated. Because when you stop feeding them emotional energy, you become unmanageable. You become unpredictable. You become someone they cannot bend or shape. The irony is that narcissists believe they are masters of the psychological battlefield, but their strategies only work on people who care about connection. Once you start seeing their tactics as tools rather than truths, the spell breaks. When you stop trying to fix them, please them, or earn their approval, the power swings back to you. Understanding the psychology of a narcissist means understanding they are emotionally underdeveloped. They never learned to regulate their emotions. They never learned to face discomfort. They never learned accountability. Everything is external. Every feeling, every blame, every failure, every success. Because internally, they don't have the stability to hold themselves up. So they rely on other people to provide it. And here's the final part. Narcissists do not change because change requires self-awareness, and self-awareness requires humility. It forces them to acknowledge the very weaknesses they spend their entire lives hiding. They defend their ego at all costs, even if it destroys relationships, opportunities, and people along the way. But once you understand all of this, you stop expecting them to be someone they are not. You stop over-explaining. You stop second-guessing. You stop internalizing their behavior. You start recognizing that their reactions are about them, not you. What once felt personal starts to feel predictable, and what once intimidated you becomes something you can navigate with calm confidence. That's the psychology behind the person who thinks they can control you. And that's why, when you speak to them with clarity instead of emotion, their entire foundation shakes. Because clarity is the one thing they cannot manipulate. Narcissists don't choose their targets randomly. They aren't drawn to everyone, and they don't try to dominate every person they meet. They are selective, highly selective. And the people they choose are not chosen because they're weak. They are chosen because they possess qualities the narcissist either lacks or wants to exploit. When you understand why certain individuals become targets, you stop blaming yourself for what happened. You stop wondering, why me? And you start realizing, of course it was me, because I had something they wanted to control. The first thing to understand is that narcissists are hunters of emotional energy. They're not looking for just anyone. They're looking for someone who can feed their ego on a consistent basis. They're looking for someone who will validate them, admire them, and absorb their emotional chaos without pushing back. They want people who have a high tolerance for emotional discomfort, people who are patient, empathetic, and understanding, because those qualities make them easier to manipulate. Empathy is one of the biggest reasons people become targets. When you're empathetic, you naturally try to understand others, even when they hurt you. You don't immediately assume bad intent. You give the benefit of the doubt. This is an incredible strength, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon. A narcissist sees your empathy not as kindness, but as a doorway. They know that empathy makes you listen longer, forgive faster, and tolerate behavior that someone else might shut down immediately. Another trait narcissists look for is responsibility. Responsible people try to hold relationships together. They step up. They fix things. They take on emotional weight even when they shouldn't. Narcissists love responsible individuals because they can shift blame, dodge accountability, and count on the responsible person to pick up the emotional mess. If something goes wrong, the narcissist points the finger outward, and the responsible person starts questioning themselves instead of questioning the narcissist. They also look for people who avoid conflict. Narcissists thrive in conflict, but not the healthy kind, chaotic conflict. They are comfortable with emotional turbulence because they grew up in it, or they rely on it to maintain control. So when they find someone who hates conflict, someone who apologizes quickly just to restore peace, they know they've found someone they can push without resistance. The narcissist escalates, and the conflict-avoidant person backs down. That dynamic becomes the pattern. Then there's loyalty. Narcissists are drawn to loyal people because loyalty means persistence, and persistence means the narcissist can behave badly while the other person stays, hoping things will improve. Loyal people want relationships to succeed. Narcissists want relationships to serve them. And those two desires create a deeply uneven dynamic. The more loyalty you give, the more control they try to take. But perhaps the most surprising reason narcissists target certain individuals is strength. Not the loud, aggressive kind of strength, true strength. Emotional strength, resilience, compassion, drive, confidence. They are threatened by these qualities, but they also want to possess them, use them, and dominate them. A strong person gives a narcissist something to conquer. If the narcissist can take a powerful, intelligent, accomplished person and make them doubt themselves, it gives them an immense sense of superiority. Your strength becomes their challenge, and your downfall becomes their victory. Narcissists also test boundaries early. This is how they identify whether someone will be an easy target. They might give a slightly insulting comment disguised as a joke. They might withhold affection to see how quickly you seek it again. They might show inconsistency. Warm one moment, cold the next, to see if you try to earn the warmth back. Each reaction tells them something. If you explain yourself too much, they learn you're someone who fears being misunderstood. If you tolerate small disrespect, they learn they can escalate it. If you try to smooth over their moods, they learn you're someone who will prioritize their emotions over your own. They watch micro-reactions. The way your face changes, the way your body shifts, the way your voice softens. Narcissists don't listen to your words. They read your emotions, your insecurities, your patterns. This isn't intuition, it's survival instinct. They've spent a lifetime learning how to manipulate environments to keep themselves in control. They target people who are givers rather than takers, people who nurture, support, and care deeply, people who believe in second chances, people who see the best in others even when others aren't showing it. These are compassionate traits, and the narcissist fakes similar traits at the beginning to hook you. They mirror your values, your communication style, your emotional needs. This is why the early stages feel so intense. It feels like compatibility, but it's actually strategy. And when they sense the slightest insecurity, they exploit it. Not necessarily cruelly at first. Sometimes they simply position themselves as the person who fills that insecurity. If you're someone who rarely feels appreciated, they pour on the appreciation at the beginning. If you're someone who craves emotional connection, they mimic deep intimacy. If you're someone who's highly independent, they pretend to admire your strength. But once they've established emotional leverage, the dynamic shifts, and all the qualities they claim to love slowly become the qualities they try to suppress. What most people don't realize is that narcissists avoid people who cannot be controlled. They avoid people who set boundaries quickly, who walk away from disrespect, who question inconsistencies, who don't respond emotionally to bait. These individuals are too difficult to manipulate. So the fact that you were targeted doesn't mean you were naive or foolish. It means you had traits valuable enough to exploit. When you understand why narcissists pick certain people, you see the pattern clearly. They are drawn to people with light because they themselves live in emotional darkness. They seek out people who heal because they themselves are emotionally wounded. They choose people who give because they themselves only know how to take. And once you recognize this pattern, their power over you dissolves. You stop feeling chosen for the wrong reasons and start choosing yourself for the right ones. Psychological detachment is the moment everything begins to shift. It's the point where you stop reacting from emotion and start responding from clarity. It's not coldness, it's not apathy, and it's not indifference. It's discipline. It's the ability to separate your internal world from someone else's chaos. And when you learn how to do that, especially around someone who manipulates, provokes, and tries to keep you emotionally hooked, you immediately break a cycle they depend on for control. Most people don't realize how much power they give away through emotional reactions. They think defending themselves makes them strong. They think explaining their intentions makes them understood. They think getting upset shows they care. But all of those responses are forms of engagement, and engagement is the fuel a narcissist lives on. They thrive on emotional friction. They want you upset, confused, or reactive, because that energy makes them feel important, in control, and relevant. When you react, they feed. Psychological detachment is about taking that energy off the table. It's a form of emotional self-defense, one that doesn't rely on shouting, arguing, or proving a point. Instead, it relies on staying grounded. It's the internal reminder. Their behavior is about them, not me. When you recognize that everything they do, every insult, every guilt trip, every dramatic response is a projection of their own insecurities, you stop personalizing it. You stop participating in their emotional theater. This doesn't mean you stop caring about yourself or your needs. It means you stop caring about their reactions. You stop letting their opinion dictate your emotional state. You stop giving them the privilege of influencing how you feel about yourself. Detachment is understanding that their anger does not require your fear. Their disappointment does not require your apology. Their manipulation does not require your cooperation. One of the first steps in psychological detachment is recognizing the emotional bait when it appears. Narcissists use specific triggers, accusations meant to make you defend yourself, silence meant to make you chase, criticism meant to make you insecure, praise meant to hook you back in, and anger meant to intimidate. The moment you understand these moments are tactics, not truths, you stop falling into the trap. The bait only works when you bite. Once you recognize the pattern, you learn to pause. That pause is where your power lies. Another core part of detachment is tone control. Narcissists read your tone more than your words. If your voice cracks, they know they've hit a nerve. If you rush your words, they know you're rattled. But when your tone is calm, controlled, and steady, it sends a signal they don't know how to process. A calm tone says, "I'm grounded. I'm thinking, not reacting." This is deeply threatening to someone who relies on emotional volatility to maintain control. Your calm forces them to confront their lack of control over you. Your body language matters too. When you stay relaxed, maintain eye contact without aggression, keep your shoulders down, and avoid fidgeting, you create an energy they cannot penetrate. They expect defensiveness, not confidence. They expect collapse, not composure. And while your calmness may infuriate them, it will also expose them. Because once they realize they cannot manipulate your body or your emotions, their usual strategies stop working. Psychological detachment also means no over-explaining. Narcissists push people into explaining themselves because explaining keeps you in a submissive position. It shifts the power dynamic, so you're seeking their approval or permission. When you detach, you stop justifying your boundaries. You stop arguing your perspective. You stop proving your worth. You state what you mean, and you leave it there. That simplicity is powerful. It signals that your decisions are not up for negotiation. And here's where detachment becomes transformational. Once you stop reacting, you start observing. Instead of being pulled into the emotional storm, you watch it from a distance. You see their tactics clearly. You see the patterns. You see how predictable they really are. And when you see clearly, you stop feeling overwhelmed. Their behavior becomes data, not danger. You start recognizing the difference between who they pretend to be and who they truly are. This clarity also helps you navigate conversations with precision. You stop guessing their motives and start predicting them. You know when they will switch from charm to coldness. You know when they will guilt trip. You know when they will play the victim. And because you see the pattern ahead of time, you no longer take the bait. Psychological detachment doesn't require emotional distance forever. It requires distance during manipulation. It's not about shutting down. It's about staying in control. You can care and still be detached. You can be compassionate and still hold boundaries. You can love someone and still protect your emotional well-being. Detachment is simply the practice of choosing internal stability over external chaos. Eventually, psychological detachment results in something the narcissist didn't expect. You become unpredictable, not because you're erratic, but because you're no longer controlled by their emotional triggers. They don't know how to make you react. They don't know how to get under your skin. They don't know how to manipulate your fear or guilt. That unpredictability is unsettling for them, because their entire strategy relies on knowing exactly how you will respond. Psychological detachment is the moment you stop being a participant in their game and become an observer. It's the moment your emotional state stops being dependent on their behavior. And when that happens, the power dynamic shifts completely. They lose their supply. They lose their leverage. They lose their influence over you. Detachment does not make you cold. It makes you free. It lets you think clearly, act confidently, and protect your energy without constant emotional drain. It transforms interactions that used to exhaust you into moments where you maintain complete control over yourself. And that kind of control is something no manipulator can fight, because it removes their favorite tool, your emotional reaction. When you master psychological detachment, you become someone who is no longer moved by the storms around you, because you've learned how to stay anchored within yourself. And that is the kind of strength a narcissist cannot touch. The moment you speak a sentence that a narcissist cannot manipulate, everything about the dynamic changes. You can feel it, they can feel it, and the space between the two of you shifts in an instant. It's not because you've overpowered them physically or intellectually. It's because you've taken away the one thing they rely on more than anything else: your emotional participation. A narcissist does not fear anger. They do not fear confrontation. They don't fear you yelling, crying, or defending yourself. Those reactions actually make them feel powerful, because they show the narcissist that they still have emotional influence over you. What they fear, deeply, quietly, almost instinctively, is calm exposure. That's what this sentence delivers: calm exposure. When you say, "I see what you're doing and it's not going to work," you do more than stand up for yourself. You reveal something that narcissists try their entire lives to hide: their tactics. They rely on you being confused while they remain the one in control. They rely on you being emotional while they stay psychologically detached enough to manipulate the moment. They rely on you defending while they attack. They rely on you trying to make sense of chaos they deliberately create. But that sentence cuts right through the fog. It says, without aggression, without accusation, and without emotional vulnerability, you are transparent to me now. Your strategy is exposed. And whatever control you believed you had over me has just evaporated. What makes it powerful is that it isn't dramatic. It isn't theatrical. It isn't an insult. It's simply truth. And narcissists cannot handle truth when it's delivered with calm certainty, because the truth threatens the entire identity they've built. Narcissists operate by keeping you off balance. They use guilt, blame, anger, withdrawal, charm, all of it, to control your emotional state. But the moment you show them that their behavior no longer triggers you, something inside them cracks. They may not show it immediately. They may not show it at all. But internally, they feel something they almost never experience: psychological vulnerability, because they realize they've lost the upper hand. And for someone who relies on power games to hold their identity together, losing the upper hand is terrifying. When you speak this sentence calmly, what you're really saying is, "I'm not afraid of your reaction. I'm not confused by your behavior. I'm not emotionally entangled in your tactics. I've stopped playing your game. I've reclaimed my power." And the moment a narcissist senses that power shift, their entire strategy collapses. They may try to escalate at first, raising their voice, changing the subject, attacking something unrelated, or suddenly playing the victim. But those reactions are proof that the sentence worked. Narcissists escalate when they feel cornered. They get louder when they feel exposed. They become defensive when they lose control. Sometimes the reaction is the opposite: is silence. They freeze. They stare at you. They recalibrate. That's not calmness. That's shock. Because they never expected you to see through them so cleanly. They never expected you to detach. They never expected clarity. In that moment, they're scrambling internally. What does this person know? How long have they known it? What else can't I use against them now? Have I lost them? Can I still control the situation? The one sentence triggers all of those internal questions. It forces them to step out of the role of the puppet master and into the uncomfortable position of being seen. The stunning part is that you're not even attacking them. You're not calling them out. You're not insulting them. You're simply stating that their manipulation failed. And that is more humiliating for them than any insult you could ever throw. But the real power of this sentence is not what it does to the narcissist. It's what it unlocks in you. It's a declaration of your own clarity, a confirmation that you've stopped internalizing their behavior, a turning point where you stop being reactive and start being intentional. Using this sentence requires you to be calm, grounded, and emotionally neutral, and speaking it reinforces those same qualities within you. It also creates an invisible boundary. It says, "I am no longer available for manipulation." It tells them that from this point forward, interactions with you will not be the same. That they will no longer get the emotional payoff they once did. And narcissists hate boundaries because boundaries limit their access to your energy. This sentence is also powerful because it cannot be argued with. If you accuse them of lying, they can deny it. If you call them manipulative, they can play the victim. If you get angry, they can use your anger against you. But when you calmly acknowledge their behavior without attaching an emotion to it, there is nothing for them to grab onto. No thread to pull. No emotional leverage to exploit. You're not giving them a problem to solve. You're presenting a reality they cannot escape. And reality is their deepest fear. They spend their whole lives running from self-awareness, from vulnerability, from responsibility. Your sentence forces a moment of reality they did not choose and cannot control. The sentence is not magic because of the words. It's magic because of what it communicates. It sends a message that you have stepped outside their influence and into your own psychological power. It tells them you see clearly. It tells them you're not participating. It tells them you know your worth now. Once a narcissist realizes that you are someone who cannot be controlled, they will never see you the same way again. You become someone they fear, not physically, not emotionally, but psychologically, someone who knows the truth. Someone whose clarity makes their manipulation useless. Someone who stands firm in a way that destabilizes their entire identity. And once that happens, you're no longer the person who bends. You're the person who stands. You're no longer the person who reacts. You're the person who observes. You're no longer the person they can shape. You're the person they must avoid. That is why this sentence carries so much power, because it marks the moment you stop being a target and start being untouchable. Building an unshakable internal core doesn't happen overnight. It's not something you achieve by reading one book, hearing one speech, or having a single breakthrough moment. It's built slowly through practice, self-awareness, and the willingness to stop abandoning yourself every time someone else demands more than they deserve. In the presence of a narcissist, or any manipulative person, your inner strength isn't just protection, it's liberation. It's what allows you to stop being controlled, to stop questioning your worth, and to stop shrinking yourself to make someone else comfortable. The foundation of an unshakable core begins with understanding that your value is not up for debate. Narcissists thrive when they sense doubt. They smell insecurity the way a predator smells fear. They can sense when you don't fully believe in yourself, and they use that opening to slip in criticism, shame, or subtle emotional pressure. When your internal sense of worth is unstable, you rely on external validation to feel complete. That's exactly what a narcissist wants. Because validation is currency they dish out and take back depending on whether you're compliant. But when your worth comes from within, their approval becomes irrelevant. Their criticism loses impact. Their praise stops being addictive. You stop being moved by the highs and lows they try to create. You don't crumble when someone disapproves of you, and you don't rise only when someone approves of you. That alone makes you incredibly difficult to control. Another part of building an internal core is emotional independence. Emotional independence doesn't mean you don't feel or care. It means your emotional stability isn't determined by someone else's mood, treatment, or attention. When you're emotionally independent, you don't wake up wondering who you have to please today or what behavior you need to adjust so someone doesn't get upset. You don't outsource your emotional safety. You don't rely on someone who is unpredictable to make you feel secure. For a narcissist, emotional independence is a nightmare. They can only manipulate someone who is emotionally tethered to them. Once you're detached, calm, and grounded, they lose the ability to throw you off balance. The silent treatment doesn't work anymore because you're not afraid of solitude. The sudden anger doesn't destabilize you because you don't absorb other people's emotions as if they're your own. The guilt trips fall flat because your internal compass, not their reactions, determines what's right for you. A strong internal core also requires boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls, they're clarity. They say, this is what I accept. This is what I don't. This is my line. This is my limit. When you have weak boundaries, you don't even notice when people cross them. You tolerate disrespect disguised as jokes, dismissiveness disguised as stress, and manipulation disguised as love. You justify what should be confronted. You forgive what should be corrected. Boundaries force you to recognize your own needs without apology. But having boundaries isn't enough. You also have to enforce them. That's where your internal strength shows. A narcissist will always test your limits. Always. The first boundary you set is not the real test. The test comes when they push and you do not move. That is when they realize they cannot control you the way they used to. And that moment is where many people feel fear, guilt, or uncertainty. But pushing through that feeling is exactly how your internal core grows. Part of building internal strength is learning to tolerate discomfort. Not the discomfort that comes from abuse or mistreatment, but the discomfort that comes from standing up for yourself. When you say no, when you walk away, when you stop explaining, when you refuse to be guilt-tripped. You may feel anxious at first. Your body may react with doubt. But every time you choose yourself, every time you protect your peace, every time you hold a boundary, your internal core strengthens. A crucial component of this internal strength is learning the power of silence. Not the silence that comes from fear, but the silence that comes from control. A narcissist wants you to react. They want you to defend yourself, shout, cry, or explain. But silence, paired with clarity and intention, is one of the strongest responses you can offer. It communicates confidence. It shows you don't need to justify your choices. It forces them to confront the emptiness of their own tactics. Another pillar of an unshakable core is self-leadership. You stop asking, "What do they want me to do?" and start asking, "What do I want to do?" You become the authority in your own life. You stop seeking permission. You stop bending your identity to fit someone else's expectations. You learn to make decisions based on your values, not your fears. Self-leadership means you don't need someone else to validate your choices because you trust your own judgment. Then comes emotional discipline. This is where true strength shows. Emotional discipline doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means managing them. It means knowing when to speak and when not to. It means controlling your tone even if the situation is heated. It means recognizing your triggers and choosing not to let them control you. Emotional discipline is quiet power. It's the kind of power narcissists cannot work with because it leaves them with no leverage. Finally, to build an unshakable core, you must learn to be loyal to yourself, not loyal to your comfort zone, not loyal to your fears, not loyal to old patterns, loyal to yourself. That means choosing your well-being even if it disappoints someone else. It means letting go of relationships that require you to abandon your identity to keep them intact. It means refusing to shrink to make someone else feel big. When you become loyal to yourself, you become unstoppable. You move differently. You speak differently. You act from intention, not reaction. And that is the kind of inner strength that narcissists cannot penetrate, confuse, or manipulate. They can't twist someone who stands firm in who they are. They can't control someone who leads themselves. They can't use fear, guilt, or shame against someone who has learned to validate themselves. An unshakable internal core is the ultimate protection. It's the transformation from being controlled to being sovereign. And once you reach this level of inner stability, you don't just walk away from manipulation. You rise above it, untouched, unbothered, and entirely in command of your own life. In the end, everything comes down to one truth. The power was never theirs. It was always yours. Narcissists don't thrive because they're strong, they thrive because you were never taught how powerful you truly are. You were never taught that your empathy is strength, that your calm is a weapon, that your clarity is a shield. You were never taught that the moment you choose yourself, everything they built on your back collapses. You don't defeat a narcissist by fighting them on their battlefield. You defeat them by stepping out of it entirely, by refusing to be baited, by refusing to be controlled, by refusing to be the version of yourself they tried to sculpt. Your freedom isn't loud, it's steady. It's the calm voice that says, "I see what you're doing, and it's not going to work." It's the boundaries you enforce without apology. It's the emotional discipline that keeps you grounded when someone else tries to destabilize you. It's the inner core you've built, brick by brick, through courage, clarity, and self-respect. And when you finally stand in that strength, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing them, and they start fearing you. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're untouchable. Because manipulation can't reach a person who knows who they are. Because control can't break someone who refuses to abandon themselves. So let this be the moment everything changes. Not because you learned a sentence, but because you learned your power. You are no longer the person who reacts, who doubts, who bends. You are the person who sees, who stands, who chooses. Walk forward with that awareness. Walk forward with that clarity. Walk forward with the strength you've always had, but finally decided to claim. And never forget, the most intimidating version of you is the one who knows their worth and refuses to accept anything less.